Welcome, the anointed ones. When the whole village shows up with pitchforks, it's not because you're a threat, it's because you're the fire they couldn't put out. You ever notice how people who claim not to like you somehow always end up forming group chats about you? Secret meetings, shared screenshots, alliances tighter than a reality show cast, and you didn't even audition. But here's the twist they didn't expect. The same community that teamed up to destroy you just got front row seats to your divine comeback. And they couldn't stop it, even with all hands on deck. This wasn't just envy. This was a full-blown coalition of the miserable. People who had nothing in common suddenly united under one mission: take you down. Some of them hadn't agreed on anything in years. But somehow, the moment it was time to betray you, everybody knew their role. Like it was a spiritual flash mob of dysfunction. Fact: in psychology, there's a term called mobbing. It's when a group irrationally targets an individual to isolate, demonize, and destroy them, usually because that person unconsciously exposes their hidden inadequacies. It's not just petty, it's primal. And that's exactly what happened to you. But here's the thing. You didn't just survive. You made it obvious they were the problem all along. So let's talk about it. Let's peel back the curtain on what really happened when the whole community tried to come for you, and what it means now that they failed in front of everyone. Strap in, because this isn't just a story of betrayal. It's a divine reversal. And God made sure the whole town watched it unfold. Number one, they needed an army to try what you faced alone. They needed an entire army to try what you faced alone. That should tell you everything. These weren't just a few haters with loud opinions. This was a group effort, a full-blown community operation to take you out. People who couldn't even stand each other suddenly found unity in trying to destroy you. That's how serious your presence was. That's how powerful your light is. When weak people feel threatened, they don't come direct. They gather reinforcement. And that's exactly what happened. They didn't just whisper behind your back. They strategized. They held discussions. They plotted like your downfall was a group project. Some of them barely knew you, but signed up for the mission anyway. Why? Because energy doesn't lie. They could feel something different about you, and it disturbed the mediocrity they were comfortable living in. And instead of elevating themselves, they decided to make you the problem. But what makes this even more wild is that you had no army. No backup, no protection from people. You stood there with no one but God and your own resilience. And still, they couldn't bring you down. They had support, status, numbers, and still failed. You didn't have to scream, expose, or defend yourself. The truth made it out anyway. That's the kind of power they didn't expect. They were banking on your silence breaking you, on your isolation crumbling you, on your loneliness swallowing you whole. But they misunderstood who you are. You were never built to blend in, and you were never protected by the crowd. You were anointed to outlast the storm, even when it looked like you were standing alone. Let's be real. Most people couldn't survive a fraction of what you faced. Constant attacks, fake apologies, public shaming, lies so bold even the devil probably took notes. And yet, you kept going. You kept waking up. You kept growing, healing, and transforming while they kept recycling the same drama. You didn't just survive. You exposed their weakness without saying a word. They needed an army for a reason, not because you were dangerous, but because you were divinely dangerous to their illusion of control. And now, with all their effort and collaboration, their biggest lesson is this: you cannot destroy what heaven ordained to rise. Number two, their unity was rooted in insecurity, not truth. They didn't come together because you did something wrong. They came together because your presence exposed everything they were trying to hide. Their unity wasn't built on truth. It was built on mutual insecurity. Each person had their own issue with you, but none of it was based on facts. It was based on how you made them feel about themselves. And the truth is, you made them uncomfortable without even trying. You didn't need to call them out. They felt seen just by being in your energy. When people are insecure, they don't look inward. They look for someone to blame for the mirror they're avoiding. You became that mirror. And instead of dealing with their jealousy, shame, or fear, they buried it under gossip. But here's what makes it worse. They pretended their alliance was about concern or justice or protection, when really it was just a well-dressed hate parade. Some of them hated how you never begged to fit in. Others couldn't stand that you stayed calm while they needed chaos to feel alive. A few were just mad that their tricks didn't work on you. So they built a storyline together to make themselves feel stronger. But strength built on lies always crumbles. And deep down, they knew that. That's why they had to keep checking in with each other to maintain the illusion. If they were really standing on truth, they wouldn't need constant validation from each other. You didn't cause their dysfunction, you revealed it. That's what they couldn't forgive. And that's why they worked so hard to flip the script and make you look like the villain. Because if you're the problem, they don't have to deal with the truth that their unity was rooted in resentment, not righteousness. But what's wild is that even with their combined effort, it still wasn't enough. Because fake unity has no staying power. Once their hate ran out of fuel, so did their alliance. People started turning on each other, second-guessing the lies, and realizing they were just following the loudest voice, not the right one. They thought they were forming a strong front, but all they did was reveal how weak they felt in the face of someone who walked in authenticity. You didn't break their bond. The truth did. And now they're left with each other's shadows while you continue to rise. Number 3. They couldn't kill what was never built on their validation. They really thought tearing you down would end you because they assumed your strength came from their approval. That's how self-absorbed they were. They believed that if they stopped clapping, you'd stop rising. That if they walked away, you'd fall apart. What they didn't realize is that nothing about you was built on their praise, their permission, or their presence. Your foundation wasn't social, it was spiritual. You didn't grow because of them. You grew despite them. Every time they withdrew support, you went deeper into purpose. Every time they lied on your name, you sharpened your discernment. They thought their rejection would cripple you, but it actually refined you. That's what makes your story so powerful. Because while they were busy trying to cut off your supply, they didn't know you were never plugged into them in the first place. They thought your worth came from the spotlight. They thought you needed their platforms, their alliances, their invitations. And when they saw you thriving without any of that, it shook them. Because in their world, value is measured by how many people cheer for you. But in your world, value is measured by how many storms you can survive and still smile. That's why their attacks failed. Because they came for your image, not knowing your identity was already rooted in something they couldn't touch. And the truth is, they never really knew you. They knew the version of you they created in their heads, the one they thought they could control or silence. But the real you, the one that keeps showing up stronger, clearer, and more focused, scares them. Because it means all the effort they put into discrediting you was for nothing. You didn't just survive without them, you excelled. And now, everything they said you couldn't do is exactly what you're doing, without needing a seat at their table. That's the part they can't live with. The part where their absence didn't stop your purpose. The part where their smear campaigns only made people curious enough to find the truth. And when people did look closer, they didn't see a villain. They saw someone who was built on something unshakable. They couldn't kill what wasn't built on them. That's why they failed. And now they're stuck watching what they tried to bury rise higher than they ever imagined. Number 4. They didn't just fail, they failed publicly. They didn't just lose quietly, they lost in front of everyone. And that's the part that haunts them. At first, it all looked so carefully planned. They told lies with straight faces, rehearsed their narratives, and convinced others to turn their backs on you. They were so sure they had the upper hand, so sure no one would ever find out the truth. But when the truth came out, it didn't knock politely. It ripped the mask off the whole production. Their stories started falling apart because liars can only keep track of so many versions. One person slipped up. Another started distancing themselves. The script unraveled piece by piece. And all of a sudden, the people who once mocked you began looking around confused, realizing they were part of a setup that made them look like fools too. The same crowd that clapped when you were down now avoids eye contact, hoping you never bring it up. That's the difference between divine justice and human revenge. You didn't have to lift a finger. You didn't have to go online, post receipts, or expose anybody. God orchestrated the whole reveal in a way that everyone saw it. Not just friends, not just enemies, everyone. And it wasn't just a correction, it was a spectacle. It was public, uncomfortable, undeniable. And now, the people who once felt bold enough to lie on you are walking around tight-lipped, paranoid, and low-key embarrassed. They went from confidently dragging your name to nervously avoiding the topic altogether. Because people started asking questions. People started remembering what you said, what they said, and how none of it added up. The timeline cracked, the mask fell, the tables turned, loudly. God didn't just vindicate you privately. He made sure it was public, visible, and permanent. Because the attack was loud, so the justice had to be louder. They wanted a performance? God gave them one. With you as the protagonist they couldn't cancel. And now your name carries a new weight. Not scandal, but survival. Not shame, but strength. They failed in front of the same people they tried to impress. And now every glance, every whisper, every awkward silence is a reminder. You were never the one to play with. Number 5. They mistook your silence for weakness, but it was strategy. They really thought your silence meant you had nothing to say, nothing to fight with, nothing to offer. That's how shallow their thinking was. In their world, the loudest voice wins, the flashiest story gets believed, and whoever shouts first is assumed right. So when you didn't react, they assumed you were crushed, powerless, defeated. But what they didn't understand is that you were never silent out of fear. You were silent out of focus. While they were busy putting on performances, you were watching, studying, healing. You weren't hiding, you were honing. Every lie they told gave you more clarity. Every rumor helped reveal who was really for you and who was performing loyalty. You didn't waste energy clapping back because you knew what they were building couldn't last. You saw the cracks before the collapse. And instead of scrambling for damage control, you sat back and let their own chaos expose them. You weren't quiet because you didn't have a response. You were quiet because not everything deserves one. You were in the process of elevating while they were busy entertaining. And now it shows. They look exhausted from chasing validation. You look stronger from doing the inner work. Their noise made them the center of a mess. Your silence made you the center of gravity. You chose strategy over spectacle, and that's why you won. Your silence wasn't passive, it was surgical. Every word you didn't say was a move. Every conversation you ignored was protection. Every attack you didn't respond to allowed truth to work behind the scenes without your interference. You didn't let your emotions lead. You let wisdom lead. That's why now, when people look back, it's clear who was walking in purpose and who was scrambling for attention. And here's the irony. They were loud for nothing. After all the drama, all the theatrics, all the noise, they still couldn't take you out. They wasted time performing for an audience that now sees through them. Meanwhile, you didn't need applause or an explanation. Your growth is the evidence. Your glow is the clapback. They mistook your calm for weakness. But now they're realizing only the truly powerful know when to speak and when to let silence do the talking. Number 6, they weaponized familiarity and still couldn't break you. They didn't come at you like strangers. They came through the people and memories that were closest to your heart. That's how deep their strategy went. They weaponized your familiarity, your childhood, your trust, your moments of weakness. They didn't just want to hurt you, they wanted to crush you from the inside out. They thought that by using what you loved, what you cried over, what you confided in, they could finally get to you in a way nothing else had. They called up old wounds like they were facts, dug through your past like it was a crime scene. They had no real ammunition, so they recycled your lowest moments to make it seem like you were unworthy, unstable, or undeserving. They used your mistakes, your trauma, even your own bloodline against you. And that's how you knew this wasn't just hate. It was spiritual warfare disguised as concern, gossip wrapped in fake care. Some of them smiled in your face while collecting information. Others acted like they were just worried about you when really they were helping push the knife deeper. They didn't just cross boundaries, they studied you. They took notes on your patterns, your silence, your soft spots. And when the time came, they threw it all at you at once, expecting you to break under the weight of your own history. But they forgot one thing. Chosen ones don't collapse under pressure, they evolve through it. Everything they tried to use as proof that you were broken only made you more powerful. You didn't run from your past, you redeemed it. You didn't crumble when they brought up what you've been through. You got bolder, clearer, more untouchable. Every time they tried to use your story against you, they unintentionally helped you write a more powerful one. They thought your history would trap you. Instead, it became your foundation. They thought your vulnerabilities were weaknesses. Instead, they became sacred doors to deeper purpose. The more they tried to shame you, the more you alchemized it into fuel. Because you were never here to hide your scars. You were here to turn them into scripture. They thought they knew you well enough to break you, but all they really did was give you the blueprint to rise. Number 7. The whole community became a cult of character assassination. At first it looked like harmless gossip. A few side comments here, a couple of shady group chats there, but it didn't stop there. It grew. It took on a life of its own. Before long, your name was on everyone's lips, like a daily ritual. People who barely knew you were suddenly spiritual experts on your character. People who never had a real conversation with you were quoting stories like scripture. And just like that, it became a movement. A cult of character assassination, led by envy, fed by lies, and kept alive by weak minds needing a common enemy. They made you the villain in a story they had to invent to feel better about themselves. It wasn't about facts, it was about emotional entertainment. You were their obsession, your silence, your progress, your resilience. It drove them mad. They picked apart your social media posts, dissected your decisions, and twisted every truth until it fit the narrative they built. And what's wild is, half of them weren't even mad at you. They were mad at what you represented, your freedom, your authenticity, your peace. That's what made them foam at the mouth. And the way they united around tearing you down. It was almost religious. They'd gather like congregants, repeating the same stories with conviction, clapping for each other's petty contributions like it was gospel. The hate became holy to them. Every lie was an offering, every insult was an act of worship. But you can't build anything sacred on a foundation of lies, and that's why the whole thing is falling apart, because eventually the contradictions started to show. They forgot what they said. They turned on each other. New people entered the picture and started asking the right questions. And once those questions started getting asked, it didn't take long to realize that none of it made sense. That all of it was projection, insecurity, and groupthink. What started as a movement ended as a mess. You didn't have to fight back, you just had to outlast the performance, and you did. Now they're standing in the ashes of their own obsession, wondering how they gave so much energy to someone they claim not to care about. That's the thing about cults. They eventually self-destruct. And this one did too. All because lies can gather a crowd, but they'll never hold sacred space. Number 8. They spent years on you because they knew you were the one. They didn't target you by accident. You weren't just caught in the crossfire. From the beginning, they knew exactly who you were. Even before you did. That's what made you dangerous to them. Your presence, your energy, your instincts. It all said power, even when your confidence didn't. They sensed your purpose before you were fully walking in it. And instead of being inspired, they were terrified, so they did what insecure people always do when they feel threatened. They tried to control it, silence it, or destroy it. But here's what's wild. They didn't just take a few shots and move on. They dedicated years of their lives to trying to dim your light. They studied you, obsessed over you, created entire strategies around keeping you small. They masked it as concern, criticism, or tough love. But it was never that. It was fear. And not fear of you doing something wrong, but fear of what would happen if you fully stepped into your power. They knew if you ever healed, elevated, and realized who you really are, their illusion of control would be over. Their influence would crumble. Their lies would be exposed. Because your existence alone challenges everything fake they've built their lives around. That's why they couldn't just walk away. They had to micromanage your downfall. They couldn't risk you shining, so they tried to keep you questioning yourself. But here's what they didn't expect. While they were watching you, trying to stop you, you were growing in silence, learning, evolving. Your pain became your wisdom. Your loneliness became your training ground. And now everything they tried to prevent is unfolding anyway, because you were never the problem. You were the prophecy. You weren't just the target. You were the test. And they failed. All that time they spent trying to mute your voice only made your presence louder. All the games, lies, and manipulation just helped sharpen your discernment. They invested years trying to destroy something that was never theirs to control in the first place. And now, they're exhausted, bitter, and confused, because you're still here, thriving, elevating, unbothered. They spent years on you because deep down, they knew what you carried was rare. And now the truth is undeniable. You were always the one. Number 9. Their failure wasn't just inevitable. It was prophesied. Their failure wasn't some shocking twist of fate. It was written into the very fabric of your purpose. The moment they decided to come against you, their defeat was locked in. Not because you were perfect, not because you had all the answers, but because what they were fighting wasn't just you. It was something divine working through you. They didn't recognize it because they weren't supposed to. That's how spiritual warfare works. The light doesn't have to explain itself to darkness. It just has to keep shining. They thought they were stopping your progress, but all they really did was help initiate your transformation. In trying to block your path, they activated it. In trying to silence your voice, they gave it more depth. They were so determined to destroy you, they didn't realize they were building the very stage they hoped you'd never stand on. That's the irony of being chosen. Your enemies become part of your training, your fuel, and your proof. The truth is, spiritual elevation requires opposition. It demands exposure. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. So when they formed that alliance against you, they weren't just being hateful. They were unknowingly fulfilling prophecy. They thought they were in control, that their whispers, their slander, their coordinated attacks were going to derail your life. But in reality, they were just lining up perfectly with the divine blueprint that said, "This one must be tested in fire before they rise in power." You didn't just survive them. You outgrew what they were allowed to access. You didn't level up because things got easy. You leveled up because they tried everything to stop you and still couldn't. That's not a coincidence. That's confirmation. They never had the power to stop what was sacred. And while they were busy scheming behind closed doors, heaven was setting the scene for your elevation. What they meant for destruction became the raw material for your destiny. They played their role, but the outcome was never in their hands. That's why their failure wasn't just inevitable. It was necessary. It was prophesied. Because every chosen one has to walk through betrayal, isolation, and opposition before the truth of who they are becomes undeniable. And now that moment has come, and there's no going back. Number 10. You made it through what would have erased most people. Let's call it what it really was. War. Not just arguments, not just drama. This was a calculated, prolonged attack designed to wear you down from the inside out. They didn't just try to ruin your name, they tried to dismantle your spirit. The lies were strategic. The gaslighting was relentless. The betrayal was surgical. It wasn't about hurting you one time, it was about making sure you never rose again. And yet, here you are. Most people would have cracked under the pressure. And not because they're weak, but because no human being is built to constantly be doubted, misunderstood, and sabotaged by people they once trusted. The average person would have shut down, spiraled, disappeared. Some would have ended up in a hospital. Others wouldn't have made it out at all. And that's not exaggeration. That's the level of cruelty that was aimed at you. You weren't just fighting what they said about you. You were fighting the mental and emotional toll of being under constant suspicion, isolation, and manipulation. They didn't want to just ruin your reputation. They wanted to make you question your own reality. That's psychological warfare at its finest. Make the person look crazy while slowly driving them to the edge. But what they didn't count on was your spiritual core. You may have cried. You may have questioned everything. You may have sat in the dark with no one to call and nowhere to run. But you didn't give up. You endured. And that endurance broke something in the spirit realm they never expected. Because when a chosen one survives what was meant to destroy them, they don't just recover, they transform. They become even more dangerous, more aligned, more unstoppable. That's the miracle they never saw coming. They thought you'd fold. They were banking on you self-destructing. But instead you elevated. Quietly, consistently, powerfully. And now the strength you carry isn't just physical, it's spiritual, emotional, and deeply earned. You walked through hell with a smile they couldn't erase. And that's why they're still shook. You survived what would have erased most people. And now your life is a walking contradiction to everything they said you wouldn't be. That's not luck. That's divine proof. And number 11, they didn't know you were the test they all failed. They thought you were the one on trial. That everything you said, did, and stood for was under a microscope. That God, life, or karma was inspecting you. But the whole time they were pointing fingers. They didn't realize something deeper was happening. They were being watched too. Spiritually, energetically, karmically. Your presence wasn't just triggering them, it was testing them. And spoiler alert, they failed. They assumed the spotlight was on your flaws, your choices, your past. But really, you were the divine instrument exposing the hearts around you. Your patience revealed their impatience. Your silence revealed their loud, messy egos. Your compassion showed their cruelty. The moment you walked in, the truth in people had to rise or rot. And many chose rot. Not because you did anything wrong, but because they weren't willing to rise with you. It was easier to try to discredit you than to grow beside you. You didn't even need to argue or defend yourself. Just by being yourself, you triggered everything fake in them. And that's why they turned on you so aggressively. You became the mirror they couldn't look into, the uncomfortable reflection they couldn't control. And when people are faced with truth they refuse to accept, they either transform or attack. They chose attack, and in doing so, they revealed exactly who they were. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a revelation, a divine sorting, the sheep from the wolves, the loyal from the opportunistic, the spiritually aligned from the spiritually dead. You weren't just going through a trial. You were the trial, and God allowed the test so that masks could be removed, alliances exposed, and hearts revealed. That's the twist they'll never get over. While they were busy trying to make you look guilty, they were being evaluated the whole time. Their reactions, their decisions, their intentions, all of it was being spiritually recorded. And now the judgment isn't on you, it's on them. You walked through the fire and came out gold. They walked into a test of character and came out counterfeit. You didn't just survive their games, you exposed the whole board. And now they're left standing in the truth of who they really are, because you were never the one being judged. You were the divine mirror that judged the room. Number 12, God let it all happen, so no one can take credit for your victory. God let it all fall apart on purpose, not to punish you, but to separate the noise from the truth. Every person who walked away, every fake supporter who folded, every door that slammed shut, none of it was accidental. You weren't abandoned, you were positioned. God stripped the stage, so when your breakthrough came, there'd be no room for confusion. No friend, no mentor, no group, no connection could say they did it. Because they didn't. You went through the storm with nothing but faith. No applause, no entourage, no comforting shoulder to lean on. And that's exactly how it had to be. Because if anyone had stayed too close, they'd have tried to take partial credit for your survival. If someone helped you up, they'd tell the world they were the reason you got back on your feet. But God made sure you were isolated. Not because you weren't loved, but because this level of glory couldn't be shared. There were moments you thought, why am I so alone in this? And now you see why. It wasn't loneliness, it was divine insulation. God needed the scene to be clear. No distractions, no false saviors, no half-hearted loyalty. Just you, the storm, and the voice inside you that said, keep going. That voice wasn't yours alone. That was heaven coaching you from within. The beauty of it all is now undeniable. Everyone saw what you went through. The smearing, the betrayal, the sabotage, the emotional collapse. And now that you're rising, there's no debate about where the strength came from. People who counted you out are scratching their heads, wondering how you're still here, how you're glowing instead of bitter, how you're thriving with no help, no platform, no campaign to prove your worth. And the answer is simple. God did it. This wasn't just a comeback story. It was a spiritual statement. You didn't just survive. You rose in such a way that made every enemy, every doubter, every fake friend irrelevant. You are the living proof that when God ordains it, no one can block it, and no one else gets the glory. They saw the destruction. Now, they're witnessing the divine rebuild, and they can't take credit for any of it. Number 13. They now fear your name in the rooms they once mocked it. There was a time when your name was a joke to them, something they tossed around in circles of gossip, arrogance, and fake superiority. You were the subject of their laughs, their group chats, their warnings to others. They mocked your spirit, downplayed your gifts, and made it their mission to turn people against you. They got bold because they thought there'd never be a consequence. They didn't just mock you, they enjoyed it. They fed off the power they thought they had over your reputation, but now, just the sound of your name makes the same people shift in their seats. They don't laugh anymore, they lower their voices. They change the subject. Because your name doesn't carry mockery anymore, it carries weight. It carries evidence. It carries vindication. The person they tried to tear down became the very proof that nothing formed against a chosen one can prosper. And that's what scares them now. Not just that you're still standing, but how you're standing. Gracefully, authentically, unapologetically. You didn't get petty. You didn't play their games. You simply elevated. Quietly, consistently. And now your life contradicts every lie they ever told about you. So every time your name comes up, it reminds them, not just of what they tried to do to you, but how little power they actually had. Your name is a spiritual indictment now, not because you cursed them, but because your existence holds a mirror to their character. It reminds them of the role they played in a smear campaign that failed, of the moments they laughed at your pain, of how confidently they spoke falsehoods, and how wrong they turned out to be. You didn't have to clap back. The truth did it for you. And now, they fear your name, not because you're vengeful, but because you're untouchable. The very mention of you exposes them, again. It triggers guilt, shame, and unfinished karma. Because in the story they wrote, you were supposed to be gone by now, broken, silenced, forgotten. But instead, your name has become a force, a reminder that divine protection is real. That the light they tried to bury now stands taller than their lies. And every time they hear your name, they remember, you didn't just survive their attacks, you outlived their influence. Number 14. Your existence is their ongoing defeat. You don't have to say a word anymore. You don't have to clear your name, explain your journey, or defend your truth. The very fact that you still exist, and exist in peace, is destroying everything they built their hate around. Your life is the contradiction to every lie they told. And the beauty of it is, you're not even trying. You're just living, healing, and evolving in real time. And it's driving them mad. They spent so much energy trying to bury you that they never prepared for what would happen if you rose anyway. They crafted a version of you they needed people to believe. Weak, unstable, fake, arrogant. They needed the world to see that version, because it made them feel justified in their own dysfunction. But now, every step you take in truth, joy, or alignment exposes the emptiness of their entire narrative. You became the evidence that they lied. Your peace, your glow, your growth. It's like a slow-burning spotlight on their past actions. They can't outrun it. They can't cover it. Every time they hear your name, see your face, or watch you thrive, it forces them to confront what they did and who they pretended to be. They thought they were building your downfall, but they were building a lifelong reminder of their own brokenness. And the thing that cuts the deepest, you're not even paying them attention. You're not throwing shade, name-dropping, or seeking revenge. You're simply rising. And that kind of calm, unbothered existence hurts worse than any comeback ever could, because it confirms what they feared the most. They never had real power over you. They once made you their mission, tracking your every move, gossiping about your name, competing with a version of you that wasn't even focused on them. But now, you're just a memory, and not the kind they can dismiss. The kind that lingers, the kind that shows up when they see someone else winning and feel that twinge of regret. You've become proof of what divine protection looks like. Proof that truth outlives noise. Your existence is their ongoing defeat, not because you're trying to hurt them, but because you refuse to let what they did define you. And that kind of freedom, that kind of undeniable grace, it's something they'll never be able to fake. They came with numbers. They came with noise. They came with coordinated attacks, secret alliances, and bold lies. But what they didn't count on was your endurance, your ability to hold your peace while heaven handled the chaos. They thought they were ending your story, but they were unknowingly introducing the most powerful chapter of your life. You weren't just a target. You were the divine test they all failed. And now, your name carries a weight they can't explain. It exposes the truth without you even speaking. It silences rooms that once mocked you. It brings discomfort to every space where lies once ruled. That's the power of divine survival. You didn't just live through it, you transcended it. And let's be clear. Your victory didn't come from revenge. It came from restraint. It came from faith. It came from your decision to rise without dragging anyone through the mud. That's what makes it sacred. That's what makes it permanent. Because what God builds in the shadows, no enemy can dismantle in the light. You became the proof that peace outlasts pettiness, that authenticity exposes manipulation, that grace is not weakness, it's unshakable strength. You are not just winning. You've already won, because you refuse to let bitterness become your identity. You let your growth speak for itself. And now the ones who tried to finish you have to live with the fact that your presence is a walking testimony they'll never escape. So walk boldly. Speak clearly. Shine freely. Not out of spite, but out of truth. Because your life is no longer about surviving what they did. It's about thriving in spite of it. And as the world continues to see the glory rise from the ashes they left behind, let there be no doubt. You weren't just protected, you were chosen. And no community of cowards could cancel that. If this message hit home, don't just scroll away. Go ahead and like the video, drop a comment and let me know which part shook your spirit the most. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because there's more truth, power and clarity coming that you do not want to miss. And if you know someone who's been silently battling a crowd that tried to break them, share this with them. Let them know they're not crazy, they're not alone, and they were never meant to stay small. This channel is for the chosen, the overlooked, the survivors, and the undeniable. So join the tribe, stay locked in, and keep rising. Your story isn't over. It's finally being told right. God bless you.